Today, we're going to fundamentally reframe something that society honestly usually celebrates, and that is chronic people-pleasing. We often look at highly accommodating people, the ones who literally never cause a fuss, who just seem endlessly easygoing, and we praise them, right? We call them selfless and quote-unquote easy to love. But today, we're going to explore the hidden, often invisible cost of constantly reshaping yourself to fit the emotional needs of everyone else in the room.
So let me ask you this directly. Are you naturally easygoing? Or is your nervous system just terrified of conflict? It's a pretty provocative question, but it pulls us right into the psychological deep end here. We usually just assume that keeping the peace is a personality trait, like, oh, they're just chill. But what if it's actually a deeply ingrained reflex designed to keep you safe?
Section 1. The myth of being nice, external versus internal.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. Society is so quick to slap external labels onto this behavior, right? Kind, generous, easygoing. That is exactly what the world sees, and frankly, what it praises. But trauma psychology increasingly recognizes the internal drivers actually at play here. For a lot of people, this behavior isn't really a conscious choice, it's a relational survival strategy, driven by fear. The nervous system becomes endlessly accommodating purely because it perceives that asserting the true self is actually dangerous.
Section 2. Attachment over authenticity, the biological cost.
Look at this devastating synthesis from developmental research. If the choice is between hiding my feelings, even from myself, and getting the basic care I need, or being myself and going without, I'm going to pick that first option every single time. When attachment, which is our basic biological need for love and survival, and authenticity come into direct conflict, a child will instinctively sacrifice authenticity. A child simply cannot risk abandonment to remain emotionally truthful. So if your environment demands that you hide your sadness just to keep your caregivers calm, your biology is going to executive order you to bury those feelings.
And we can actually biologically track how this unfolds chronologically. First, a child notices tension when expressing a certain emotion. Second, they hide that disappointment. Third, they adapt their behavior to secure approval and restore peace. And fourth, they erase the self. Over repeated interactions, this compiles into a deeply painful nervous system lesson. Small, unspoken feelings gradually turn into a permanent strategy of disappearing, just to stay connected.
Section 3. The fawn response, a survival strategy.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how psychotherapist Pete Walker defines the fawn response. We all know about fight, flight, or freeze when we're facing danger, but fawning is entirely different because it works directly through the relationship itself. You attempt to secure safety through appeasement, accommodation, and emotional compliance. Basically, you neutralize the threat by becoming so incredibly useful and low maintenance that the other person literally has no reason to abandon you.
These childhood adaptations take on some very recognizable forms. Maybe you were the family peacekeeper, or the caretaker for your own parents. Maybe you were the child who decided it was just safest to become completely invisible, or the emotional radar, hyper-attuned to every subtle mood shift in the room. If you relate to these, I want you to know it's not because you were wrong for having feelings. It's because you were in an emotionally volatile or immature home where caregivers simply lack the capacity to tolerate your independent emotional reality. All of those behaviors, they're just desperate attempts to solve one single biological equation. How do I preserve connection without provoking danger? Take a second to just let that sit. You became emotionally manageable because, at the time, your survival absolutely depended on it.
Section 4. Cost of self-erasure. Losing the self.
Trauma specialist Gabor Maté frequently highlights this exact split, which leads to profound self-erasure. This is the gradual disconnection from your own internal experience. Over decades of doing this, your nervous system becomes entirely externally referenced. You spend so much of your energy monitoring other people's moods and minimizing your own footprint that your authentic self just gets completely buried underneath all that chronic emotional management. So, how does this actually look in everyday adult life? Do you agree automatically before even checking if you actually agree? Do you apologize reflexively for things that aren't even your fault? Do you catch yourself shaping your opinions to match the atmosphere of the room? Or maybe you feel intense anxiety when someone else is disappointed? These aren't just quirky little personality habits. They are reflexive survival behaviors. And the tragic result of living this way is that you become an expert on everyone else's inner world and a total stranger to your own. This is exactly why highly accommodating people eventually hit a massive wall of identity confusion. You are so skilled at reading others, yet when someone asks you what you want, you draw a total blank. It's a very specific, quiet kind of exhaustion that you carry around. So the crucial point is understanding the massive difference between these two realities. Authentic generosity contains freedom. You give because you actually want to, while remaining connected to your own internal needs. Compulsive accommodation, on the other hand, is driven by fear. It's emotional caretaking required to feel safe. Giving constantly from a place of fear rather than freedom produces this deep, crushing depletion.
And that depletion leads to the dark secret of chronic people-pleasing, the resentment right beneath the niceness. If you find yourself emotionally exhausted, burned out, and full of repressed anger, even toward people you genuinely love and care about, listen to me. It does not make you a manipulative person. That resentment is just your nervous system finally recognizing the massive emotional cost of endless self-abandonment.
Section 5. Love without disappearance, healing connection. Healing requires learning the difference between genuine connection and trauma-driven self-erasure. And look, healing doesn't mean you have to become cold or detached or selfish. Empathy is a beautiful thing, but these survival strategies from childhood are actively blocking you from having genuine intimacy today. Real connection requires two complete people, which means it requires you to stop hiding. Let's move to and see how this builds into real life, because healing doesn't start with dramatic blow-up confrontations. It starts with small moments of internal recognition. It's noticing your automatic apology. It's forcing a 3-second pause before you reflexively agree to something. It's finally recognizing your resentment and identifying your own needs. These tiny shifts are incredibly powerful because they challenge deeply conditioned survival expectations. You are slowly, deliberately teaching your body that it is safe to exist. I want to conclude this explainer with one final profound thought. If becoming lovable required abandoning yourself, was the connection ever truly safe to begin with? As you process all of this, please remember that genuine love never requires the continual disappearance of the self. You are allowed to take up space, you are allowed to have needs, and you are allowed to be safely, wonderfully, authentically yourself.
Thank you for watching. If something in this resonated with you, then you're already closer than you think. If you're ready to go deeper, there's a link below to my book, The Survival Self: How Childhood Adaptation Becomes Adult Identity, and How to Finally Live Beyond It. This isn't theory, it's a framework you can actually use. Tap the link below and step into it.